Maldon, Essex, 1863. It's a blissfully calm night. You decide to take a stroll through the promenade park. As you take the path neighbouring the ancient Blackwater estuary, you hear the tranquil lapping of water against the banks, ropes creaking as lurching boats are loosed from their moorings. The tide flows inland. On the water there snakes tendrils of mist. You breathe in the air. The distinctive scent of black Maldon mud is overpowering. A stark hybrid of seaweed and some anomalous ingredient you can't place. Hearing a faint, mournful wail upon the still air, you move off the path and onto the grass verge. Your eyes scan the evening gloom, peer at the waters, scour the vast plateau of mudflats silver beneath a waning moon. Somewhere, malevolently lurking in the mist, is your host. You are come to his domain. In the world of twilight, the edges of darkness are peopled by unimaginable horrors. Tonight, on British Folklore, Myths and Legends, we chronicle the account of one such horror, the abominable Crabbus Man. Once a thriving port town on the east coast, and the battle site of one of the Anglo-Saxon's most vivid poems, this picturesque market town is no stranger to peculiar happenings. It has been regarded as the most haunted town in Essex, with ghost walks common in the winter months. Crabbus is just one of a plethora of horrors born here. His story is tragic and brutal. It begins with a priest, Reverend Joseph Arkwright, who in 1863 wrote in his diary, "As any fool know, to walk after dark through Promenade Park is to walk in the shadow of death. For there the Crabbus Man lurks and scuttles, with his clacking claws and twitching eye stalks, ready to leap upon the unwary and clack at them, they whose souls shall know no peace for all their remaining days upon the earth." Arkwright never caught a glimpse of the creature himself, but became utterly obsessed with his conviction that such a shambling abomination was indeed prowling the Promenade Park after dark. He was prone to paranoid behaviour and hallucinations, often witnessing hints of Crabbus's presence in clouds and shadows. The origins of Crabbus are even more unsettling. A child born half human, half crab, he was swiftly taken by horrified townsfolk to the river to be drowned. As the mayor held the baby in the shallows of the Blackwater, he lost his grip, and Crabbus slipped away into the deep network of crab caverns beneath the riverbed. To this day, he is thought to weep and wail in his mud cavern, lamenting his rejection and planning his revenge. This is where things begin to get strange. I first learned of Crabbus at one of Maldon's aforementioned ghost tours. I was a university student at the time, back home visiting for the night. The tour guide recounted a number of stories, taking us all over town. When we got to the Promenade Park at the end of the tour, he recounted the tragic tale of Crabbus. When searching online for information on the legend afterwards, I only got 2 hits. The first was a musician called Von Vorten, who had written a song called Crabbus Man. Sure enough, the lyrics retold the legend. The second hit directed me to Essex Terror, a folklore website. Almost word for word, there in front of me was the story the tour guide had recounted, which immediately led me to believe that the tour guide had used Essex Terror as a source when writing his tour. I became slightly obsessed with Crabbus's story, having always been inspired by Lovecraftian aquatic horror, and felt more connected to my hometown as a result. I annoyed everyone by telling them about Crabbus for weeks. Then I wrote a song called Crabbus Man, and performed it in the prog rock band I was in at uni. Here is a clip of us playing it.
Right, if you could scuttle while we do this song, it'd be very much appreciated. We want to get a dance going called the Black Mesa Scuttle. Oh yeah.
What, like a crab?
Like a crab, exactly like a crab. Station sent from heaven, they got blood, red eyes, and a pitch black shell. Go sideways, don't you let his claws grab. Never been seen, but he's half man, half crab.
Everything short of starting a fan club, I did. Eventually, in January 2016, as a graduate with a lot of time on my hands, I decided I would write a short story about Crabbus and send it off to competitions and magazines. When I looked up Essex Terror on Google to refresh my memory of the tale, however, the website was nowhere to be seen. After some further investigation, I managed to locate a relevant Twitter account and made contact with the site's author. The author of the site graciously sent me everything he had on Crabbus Man, including some artist's renderings of Crabbus. I told him about my song and short story, and he sent me one of his own stories, which had me in stitches. It then hit me that the author had a particularly unique sense of humour, largely satire and farce. I didn't think too much of it for another 2 years, and when I dug out my old emails as preparation for starting this channel, I viewed them in a new light. Several clues hinted that not everything was as it seemed with the Crabbus story, so I did some further investigation. After conducting hours of research, I believe that the Crabbus legend is in fact a modern urban legend, invented and perpetuated by a few people. If this is the case, this is the story of how 3 people fooled me, any none too savvy Essex Terror visitor, the tour guide who no doubt used Essex Terror as a source, and the subsequent hundreds of customers attending his tours. Regarding the information the author of Essex Terror provided me by email in January 2016, the first snippet of Crabbus lore containing the quote from Reverend Arkwright was sent to Essex Terror by an anonymous contributor in an article titled Maldon, the most haunted town in Essex, published in 2010. The story of Crabbus's origins comes from a locally published, home-printed pamphlet handed to the website author at the Maldon Regatta in 2011. Both of these sources the author informed me he had lost contact with, and could therefore not verify the contributor's information. This image, sent to me by the author of Essex Terror, shows a picture card of an Essex monster, one of 42 published in 1912, publisher unknown. My suspicion was instantly raised when I recently looked upon the image, noting a large hairy beast with walrus-like teeth glowering at what do not appear to be indigenous Maldonians. I then found this photo on Google when searching for Maldon Crabbus. When I followed the link, I was brought to the author of Essex Terror's Medium website. The page showed a collection of amusing fake news articles from the early 20th century. This brings me back to von Vorten, the musician, and incidentally, the first person to alert the author of Essex Terror to the myth, so I was told in that same email. Yesterday I sent von Vorten a message explaining that I was creating a video series on British folklore and asked if he would be willing to talk about Crabbus. Today he replied, and when I asked if Crabbus was a modern fabrication, he told me that it was mostly modern, although there are similar Essex legends that I've assumed were made up recently that actually date back further. Sometimes it's hard to tell. He goes on to say, I was first told about the Crabbus Man in August 2006, when somebody asked me to write a song about him. Sadly, I have lost touch with the person in question, so I'm not sure whether they made him up. When I read this message, my memory was jogged. I seemed to remember that in the story the author had sent me, that had me in stitches, he mentioned the person who had informed von Vorten about Crabbus. Sure enough, when I looked at the acknowledgements page, this nugget appeared. It seems that the story begins with this mysterious figure that both von Vorten and the author of Essex Terror have lost touch with. I was tempted to pry further, but have since become very self-aware of how obsessed I have become with this story, and would, in all honesty, rather not know if Crabbus is a traditional legend or a modern fabrication. Somehow, the desire to wonder outweighs that of discovering the truth. It is worth mentioning at this point that this person, as you may be wondering, is not actually Joseph Arkwright, but an image of an Australian priest I obtained from Wikimedia Commons. licensed under the public domain. I deviously used it as a dramatic storytelling device. It was not my intention to deceive any viewers. I had no idea how the production of this video would develop, originally intending to simply cover the tragic tale, but when I scratched beneath the surface there was so much more. I can assure you that in future I will be almost exclusively using these old rare tomes I picked up in charity shops as source material, so the legends and myths from here on out will be traditional ones. Thank you for joining me on this first installment of British folklore, myths and legends. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like, share and subscribe. I'll see you next time.